Radio for readers, Bookmark.
This is Bookmark. I'm Marc Bernier. The nation's top authors are coming up next. Mark Halperin and John Heilemann are with us to talk about Double Down. Thanks for coming to visit us while you're here for the Miami Book Fair. It's good seeing you both.
Great to be here. Thank you.
What's the most common question you've been asked by people who watch politics? Is it about that first debate, or is it about something about Obama?
Oh, I think the main question people are curious about is how did the president get reelected facing the odds he did, given how weak the economy was? And that relates to both the Republican search for a nominee, but also some of the things we write about in the book that are most new and we think offer a fair amount of insight into the president, which is how did he struggle with the concept of being an incumbent, thinking about his record, but also thinking about what a second term would be like.
In this book, you also talk about the metamorphosis of the president, that he embraces gay marriage. What happened there? Did he see him losing a lot of constituents if he didn't start to embrace it?
I think it's more that the president had been quietly, privately, and kind of concealing the reality of his support for gay marriage for a long time. We report about in the book how he had told some aides back as far as 2004 that he was in favor of gay marriage, and a lot of people around the president knew that that was the case. He got to the place where after a few years in office, it was getting increasingly untenable for him. He felt kind of foolish walking around saying that he was still evolving on this issue when public opinion was rapidly moving in favor of gay marriage, and he knew that the party was going to embrace gay marriage at the convention in 2012. So he felt like he needed to get to a place where he could be honest about how he felt, and he needed to get to a place where he was where the party was. The question was just a question of timing, and that became a really a difficult thing to work out, and he obviously got his hand forced a little bit by Vice President Biden. Did the president know that he was looking diminutive when he stood near Bill Clinton, and Clinton has this rock star status where the lights seem to go on and the cameras seem to start clicking? Does that bother him?
Neither President Clinton nor President Obama lack for confidence, and their relationship, which we chart in great detail in the book, does relate to a lot of these questions of overshadowing or of competitiveness. President Obama, in the fall of 2011, one of the periods where his presidency re-election was really imperiled, despite his failure to earlier on kind of court and consult with Bill Clinton, decided something Barack Obama rarely does, which is he said, I need help. I need help from Bill Clinton if I'm going to get reelected. So whatever feelings he had about being overshadowed or competitiveness, he put aside to court him. And although there were some rough parts in the relationship in 2012, for the most part, you see a pretty dramatic arc of the relationship of change, where by the end of the campaign, they're, if not really good friends, there's at least a closeness and a warmness to their relationship that had never existed before.
Is Benghazi a millstone around Hillary's neck?
Well, I think there will certainly be questions about it raised if she runs for president, which we're not sure she will, and if she gets the Democratic nomination, which I think she probably will if she decides to run.
You have doubts? I'm sorry, you have doubts
about her running? Yeah. Sure. I mean, there's she's going to be. It's a very big decision to run for president. She's done an awful lot in her life. She's had some health issues. Her husband's had some health issues. She might decide she just doesn't want to spend the last conceivably 8 years of her productive life doing this last thing. I never assume that anybody's going to run, but I mean, she certainly is giving it serious thought. So if she runs, she'll probably be the Democratic nominee. If she's the Democratic nominee, there are Republicans who will want to prosecute the question of Benghazi. I think the public by the end of 2012 didn't care about Benghazi, broadly speaking. Many hardcore conservatives cared about it a lot, but most persuadable voters didn't care about it in 2012, and I don't think will care about it in 2016. They'll care about it even less. So I'm not sure that's a millstone. It'll certainly be something Republicans will throw at her, but whether it'll have any consequence or not is a totally different matter.
So is that why Joe Biden's out buying lunch the other day? I mean, he just wants to show I'm an everyman.
Yeah, I mean, Joe Biden is kind of the odd man out in Double Down to some extent. He's a big character in our book, and he's someone who has played a big role in the administration. But you see throughout Double Down, he's trying to fight his way in to be part of the political team to make it an Obama-Biden ticket. We report in the book at one point the president's top aides considered dumping him from the ticket or replacing him with Hillary Clinton. And he's now in a kind of an uncomfortable position, which the election ends, and the Clintons and the Obamas are now closer than ever. They're almost one political family. Joe Biden, the odd man out, as many people in the Obama sphere have endorsed or expressed support for Hillary Clinton running. And I think the vice president now is really struggling to not just find a role in the second term, but to figure out where he fits in all the speculation about 2016. If she runs, I don't think he'll run. If she doesn't run, I think he'll run, but he'll face a formidable challenge from a lot of people.
When Double Down first came out, Democratic operatives downplayed the examination of replacing Biden on the ticket. Was that to be expected? I mean, they make it sound like, hey, we had to run all the numbers. We were a little soft in some areas. Were they seriously considering it?
Well, what we actually heard was Democratic operatives in the White House confirming exactly what we wrote in the book, which was that at a period of time when the president was at his low ebb, that Bill Daley, the chief of staff, and several other of Barack Obama's top aides felt like that it would be a dereliction of duty not to explore the matter of whether adding Hillary Clinton to the ticket and taking Biden off would appreciably improve the president's odds of re-election. And so they went out and polled it and did focus groups on it to find out what the effect would be. That's what we wrote. That's what they said. And they can, people, the question of whether it was, quote, seriously considered is like kind of one of those things like what's the definition of the word is. As it happens, when they looked at the polling and the focus groups, which is something they denied doing for 4 years, in the first Obama term, they looked at those numbers and saw that Hillary Clinton wouldn't have changed the calculus very much, and so the matter didn't go beyond that. If the numbers had come back differently, though, I think there would have been another step taken in that direction.
And then there's Governor Christie. He, like the Obamas and the Clintons, Governor Christie tried to downplay this issue with Romney. Romney actually, supposedly, when the book came out, or it was right to be released, did he call Christie to say, hey, look, what I really meant to say was, what happened there?
Well, Governor Christie and Governor Romney have a good relationship personally, but like most human beings, you can have a good relationship with someone personally, but there still at times can be tensions. Governor Romney wanted to think about Chris Christie as his running mate as part of a group of 5 finalists. He decided there were too many controversies in Chris Christie's past, so he set that aside and took him off the list. One of his aides said, no, we might need Chris Christie because we're in a street fight, and he's the best street fighter in America to go up against the president. So he considered him again. And then again, in looking at some of those controversies, he decided he couldn't risk it. It was too potentially distracting. It's true that Governor Romney called Governor Christie because a lot of the information about that background check that the Romney campaign did was given to us. Governor Romney did call him to apologize, but I don't think it's harmed their relationship. But it certainly has reinforced Governor Christie's view that we write about in Double Down that the Romney campaign was not very well run from his point of view.
And yet, we have Christie winning by a big margin for his reelection, and there are many people who wonder, is that embrace of the president going to come back and hurt him? Many people, including me, I thought he was just being a good governor. His state was in a mess. The president could jump in and help him. What's he going to do? Not take the help? What was Romney's reaction when he saw him receive the president?
Well, Governor Romney was and his colleagues in Boston agreed with you that it was perfectly reasonable for Governor Christie to accept help from President Obama and indeed to stand shoulder to shoulder with President Obama. What they didn't like was the fact that for 4 or 5 days in a row, Chris Christie basically both metaphorically and literally wrapped himself around President Obama in a big bear hug and talked about over and over again on the media, talked about how great President Obama was, how thankful he was, what an awesome job he was doing. The attitude in Boston in the Romney High Command was that it was kind of one thing to give President Obama a hug. It was another thing to give him a French kiss. We quote one of Romney's advisors saying something like that, and they thought he might have gone a little overboard. And I think there are still some people, not everyone, not the mainstream of the party, but there's still some in the Republican base who remember that pretty vividly and will hold it against Chris Christie. Probably not enough to stop him from whatever his ambitions are, but there's still some bad feelings about that in some parts of the party.
What did you find is going on between Rand Paul and Chris Christie? Is it real or is it fabricated?
Well, I think it's real. The Republican Party is in a place it's never been in the modern era. There's no obvious front runner. There's no clear heir apparent, and that's the person in the past who's almost always become the Republican nominee. And I think anyone now who's got some strength, some constituency, and Rand Paul and Chris Christie both do, is out there trying to flex a little bit, to try to get attention, trying to kind of mark some of their turf. And those two guys are pretty fearless. They don't shy away from fights, and I think what you've seen with both of them, and particularly with Governor Christie, if someone criticizes him, he'll criticize them back. And if the other person does it again, they'll come back even harder. And so I think if they're both candidates in 2016, the thing will escalate even more. They're just not afraid of a fight.
Some of our Florida listeners and viewers are wondering if the president will come to Charlie Crist's aid, as Charlie Crist spoke at the Democratic convention. He's running for governor again. He was a Republican, now he's a Democrat. But does Obamacare make people feel the president might be radioactive for a while?
Well, the president, I think, probably will be radioactive for a while. Although, especially if, so much hinges on the question of what happens with the actual policy and with the law. If President Obama's team manages to fix that website and get things up and running again, as they need to, really desperately need to, over the course of the next couple months, he may be a lot less radioactive come next, March, April, May, June. If the whole thing falls apart, I don't think there's going to be very many people who are going to want to see President Obama, except to raise money for them in their election races in 2014.
For the people who have not yet gotten Double Down, will readers get any sense that as you were doing your reporting in this run-up to 2012, that you saw problems with the Obamacare rollout and that they kind of tamped it down to get past the election?
Well, it's clear that in the fall of 2011, about a year before the election, President Obama decided he wasn't going to focus very much on governance or getting things done, but rather to just frame the election in order to win re-election. But I think the problems that existed in the implementation of the computer, of the website and all that, we don't write about that, but we do write about something that I think is causing the president's problems to spiral a bit more out of control, which is he does not have a lot of allies. He's alienated Republicans, he's alienated a lot of people in the business community, and he's alienated Democrats too. And so at a time when the president could use a lot more voices defending Obamacare, talking about how important it is to the Democratic Party, you don't see a lot of prominent Democrats out there speaking first and foremost in favor of it. Bill Clinton, again, another example of the kind of ebb and flow of the Obama-Bill Clinton relationship. He's out there, his most prominent comment about Obamacare since the trouble started was to say he thought the president should cave on the issue of allowing people to keep their policies, and that is very much foreshadowed in the book.
In putting Double Down together, did you find, as many of us suspected, that Americans want to elect a domestic president, strong on domestic policy, they don't care about foreign policy, or do we have it wrong?
Well, certainly, especially at a time when the economy is not particularly strong, and that's been the case. Obviously, President Obama inherited a horrible economy, and to the extent that he was successful in keeping the country from falling off the cliff, he didn't turn the economy around in a dramatic way. The unemployment's still very high by historic standards. GDP growth still very slow by historic standards. And for that, in moments like that, most Americans are focused on bread and butter issues, kitchen table issues, how they're going to deal with their kids' college tuitions and how they're going to deal with their health care. This is a time when domestic issues are at the fore. Usually people focus on issues that are more where you can afford to look abroad a little bit more when things are really strong at home. When things are weak at home, you're focused on what's going on your front doorstep.
Is Ted Cruz the new darling of conservatives to the point where he'll be paraded around the country to show, look, we should have listened to him, maybe we'd be better off? Or is he not yet there?
I think he's a bit damaged because for a lot of people in the establishment and even some people in the conservative movement, Senator Cruz's leadership on the strategy of how to deal with a face-off on the government showdown and the debt ceiling did not work. And I think he's going to have to prove to people that he can not only inspire the base of the Republican Party, but also raise money and get along well with parts of the establishment. Because, again, that's the dominant wing of the Republican Party. Even in 2012, after the 2010 midterms, when the Tea Party was so strong and dominating in that midterm election, 2 years later, the party nominates Mitt Romney, someone very much more aligned with the establishment wing of the party than the grassroots. So I think Ted Cruz has maybe made a miscalculation, introduced himself to the country not in the best way, and I'm not sure how much work it would require, but it would be a lot to repair that first impression damage.
What about Mike Lee of Utah? Is he a little safer, but just not as well known?
A little safer. I'm certainly not a lot less well known, and certainly a lot less toxic at this moment than Ted Cruz. Not someone who I think is likely to step into the presidential spotlight and get as much media attention as someone who's a little bit more confrontational. Even though Mike Lee is obviously a pretty hardcore conservative, but he's not Ted Cruz.
Mark and John, this all comes under the umbrella of the Republicans don't have a deep bench. What about Marco Rubio? He seems to be doing conservative rehab right now.
Well, I think Senator Rubio has a bright future ahead of him and has done a lot of things that have enhanced his standing in the party. I think the way he's handled immigration has really hurt him with a lot of people. Republicans want most of all across the party a winner in 2016. They want to win the White House back. And the way Senator Rubio went out first making a kind of a centrist stand on immigration, going to conservative media and really defending his position and surviving that, I think positioned him more strongly. But he's since then really backed off in a way that I think has left a lot of people unsatisfied, both people who would like to see a path to citizenship and those who strongly oppose it. So I think Senator Rubio did not come out of this first big high-profile stand on immigration and with an enhanced standing in terms of the presidency.
Is Rick Perry in Texas viable in 16?
Well, I think he's certainly interested to run in 16, and we've seen him, giving every indication that he thinks he can get back and give this thing another try. One of the things that you see across the couple books that we've done is, it's hard to run for president, and people discover as when they get into it, no matter how well prepared they think they are, they learn that this is a much more demanding and challenging environment than even running a big state like Texas. Governor Perry had set of particular problems that we write about in the book, particularly related to his health, back surgery that he had, that the complications arising out of that kept him from being able to run. His inability to run kept him from being able to sleep. He's a chronic insomniac, and so he spent most of his campaign in a state of total exhaustion, which led to some high-profile flubs on the debate stage that killed him. I think he looks at that and says, my health is going to be better in 2016. I now have had the experience of doing this once. I won't start quite so late. Those are all going to be advantages, and I think he still thinks he has a good record to run on, and a great new pair of glasses. So maybe we'll have a new Rick Perry. He'll certainly do better than he did in 2012. There's no doubt about that.
Finally, the future of the Speaker, John Boehner. At times he was almost invisible during this, in the run-up to double down in the election of 2012. Was this by design? Did Boehner have little interest? Or did party leaders tell him, you need to sit this out. You've got radioactive problems?
He's just not temperamentally interested in being the kind of high-profile speaker of like a Nancy Pelosi or Tip O'Neill. There are times when he steps out, but he also is smart enough to know, he's a very smart guy, that the Speaker of the House is doesn't have the megaphone of the president. And he would rather be an inside strategist, try to keep his conference in line, and to look to other people to kind of take the high-profile jousting against the president. He's not somebody who needs attention. He doesn't relish being in front of the cameras in any way, and so he lets others do that.
Finally, are you under contract to do Triple Down, Game Change 2016?
We're under no obligations to do anything whatsoever, but you never know, as they say in the media business. Stay tuned.
Do you find this really enjoyable, enriching experience? The collaboration's been very successful.
It's a great experience to be able to do 500 interviews, talk to everybody involved in these presidential campaigns, and try to tell the story of what happened, which you can't do, we can't do, and others can't do in real time. So it's it's a lot of work, but it's incredibly rewarding, and it's first draft of history to some extent, history journalism, and spending time trying to go back and unravel the mysteries of Clint Eastwood and Bill Clinton and Christie and all the things that no reporter can get in real time because campaigns move too fast. So yeah, it's good.
Hey, that was going to be my last question, but I got to ask this. When Clint Eastwood's giving the speech, are there people standing there with headphones on saying, get him off, we're dying here?
Well, worse than that. They not only did they have those headphones on and people were racing around trying to get him off stage, but one of Governor Romney's chief strategist, Stuart Stevens, was backstage actually vomiting while this was going on. So there was a state of panic. They liked their public posture was, oh, it was great, no problem, everything was fabulous, but in truth they were in a state of total panic while it was happening because they accurately saw what the outcome was going to be, which was that Governor Romney's speech that night, his biggest speech of his political career, his big moment to reintroduce himself to the American people, was going to get totally overshadowed by this bizarre act that Clint Eastwood was doing. Everyone knew the media was going to cover that, and that's exactly what happened the next day.
Mark Halperin, John Heilemann, Double Down, our guest today on the Bookmark program. Great seeing you both. Congratulations on your work.
Thanks. Great to be here.
Thank you.
That's Bookmark for this week. If you have comments or thoughts on future authors, send an email to us at our website, bookmark.us. That's our broadcast for today. Thanks for watching.